I'm going to talk about how to do an informative speech. So the purpose is to teach your audience something. There are 3 simple steps. So the first is an introduction, which is essentially a hook. So you want to grab the audience's attention and give them a reason to listen. The second is your body, so your main points that you're going to hit. And then the last step is just a very simple conclusion. So kind of telling people what you hope they have learned. So I'm going to do one about how to be an ESL teacher. So my introduction or my hook, I would say, do you want to have the adventure of a lifetime? I hope my audience says yes. Then I would do my bodies. So I would say, maybe I'd talk about the qualifications you need to do it, maybe like the experience you need, how to apply, and then how to get your visa, and then finally you would go teach English in another country. So that would be the body. I'd be actually giving my audience information about how to do the various steps. And then I would do a conclusion. I would say maybe like a call to action. I could say, are you ready for the big adventure? And I hope that my audience says yes. So those are the simple steps in how to do an informative speech. Hi, this is Jackie. So today I'm going to talk about a very simple writing activity, dictation. I know dictation kind of has this negative connotation to it. It is a bit old school, which I understand. It kind of comes out of like the grammar translation method of teaching English from I don't even know how long ago, hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years ago, something like that. However, I do think it does have value. So some of the reasons that I like to throw a bit of dictation into my classes is that it really helps students practice things like spelling, punctuation, including capital letters, question forms, that kind of thing, contractions, grammar, phrasal verbs, etc. So if you have a purely communicative class and students are just talking to each other, they may not even know things like capital letters or punctuation in English. Of course, it's important. If they're writing a business email, students have to know this kind of stuff. So that's why I like to focus on these things once in a while, and dictation is a great way to do that. So the way it works is that students get out a notebook or a piece of paper, and then you can read out, for beginners, you can read out a single word, orange. And they spell orange in their notebooks. That's the very, very beginner. Higher level students, I would say a sentence. Today is Monday. And they have to write today is Monday in their notebooks, including a capital letter, a period, all the correct punctuation in that. And then the highest level is to say something like a question form. For example, what day is it today? Students write, what day is it today? Then at the end of the activity, they have to answer the question. Today is Tuesday. Or you could say the answer form. Today is Tuesday. They write down today is Tuesday. And then at the end of the activity, they have to come up with a question form. What day is it today? All right, so that is my simple dictation activity. If you like it, be sure to check out the other activities in my book, ESL Writing Games and Activities. Hey, this is Jackie from eslactivity.org. So today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite activities, Dictogloss. So Dictogloss is such a good listening activity, and I generally will use it kind of for higher level students as opposed to lower level ones. So the way it works is that you can find or write a passage for whatever grammar or vocabulary point that you want to cover. You can often look in ESL textbooks that will have like a story or something, or I'll write my own if it's for like a Christmas activity or Valentine's Day or something like that. So I put students into pairs, and they each need a pen and a piece of paper, and then I read out the story at a faster than normal pace for the level of students. And the students will get a little bit stressed out. They'll say like, what? Like slow down, it's too fast. But that's actually the point. So students have to take notes about what they hear and try to get the key words. And then in pairs, they talk together to attempt to kind of recreate the skeleton of the story that they've heard. And then I'll read out the story one more time, and students go with their partners and do the same thing. And then in the end, students can compare what they have with the original version. So students can do this just orally by speaking to each other, or they can try to write out the story to make it very similar to what you read. So either way, it depends on the level of students and what you're going to focus on in that class. Today I'm going to talk about a very simple ESL warm-up for higher level students. So it's called 5-minute debate. Think of a controversial statement such as fast food companies shouldn't be allowed to advertise to children, or smoking in public places like parks or beaches should be banned. So just say that statement to students and then maybe just get them to put up their hands. I'm saying whether they agree or disagree with it. Hopefully there'll be about 50-50. If there is, get a student who chooses yes and a student who chooses no to match up with each other. If there isn't an unequal number, you'll have to just assign some sides and just kind of like make a little joke about it and say, I know you don't actually think that, but this is a test of your reasoning, your logic. This will be a good challenge for you to take actually the other side than what you agree with. So those two people can go together and they can have a quick little up to 5-minute debate. So it could be like even 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. And then if people are kind of done and you notice that the groups have kind of stopped talking, you can just say stop. It doesn't have to be exactly 5 minutes. And then just kind of elicit some opinions from the groups about like the people, their arguments in favor and their arguments against. And then if you're having fun, you can do another round or another couple rounds. So that is a very quick ESL warm-up or icebreaker activity. I'm going to talk about how to do a demonstration speech. So the purpose of a demonstration speech is to inform or to illustrate something. So the quick steps are to hook your audience, give your audience a reason to listen to you. The second step is to explain what you'll show. The third step is to actually do the demonstration. And the fourth step is a quick conclusion. So I will do an example. All right, so my hook might be something like, do you know what could make a huge difference to your athletic performance? My audience would say, oh, interesting. I wonder what that is. I have no idea. And then I would explain what I'm going to show. And then I'll say, I'm going to show you how to hit a forehand correctly in tennis. Good technique compared to bad technique can make a huge difference in your tennis game. Then I'm going to do the demonstration. So I would talk about like my feet, I would talk about my hands, I would talk about follow through, I would talk about how to hold the racket correctly, and of course I would have my tennis racket there with me. So I would demonstrate all the steps that it takes to hit a tennis ball correctly using the forehand. Then I would do the conclusion. So I would say, in conclusion, I hope you've learned the correct steps for hitting a forehand in tennis. And if you would ever like to play with me, just let me know. All right, so those are the steps to do a demonstration speech. So hooking audience, explain what you'll show, do the actual demonstration, and then a quick conclusion. Here are some interesting debate topics to win. Number 1, homework should be banned. The second debate topic is all students should wear school uniforms. Number 3, teachers will eventually be replaced by computers. Number 4, phones should be banned in schools. The fifth debate topic to win is playing video games makes you dumb. Number 6, everybody should be vegan. The seventh debate topic to win is smoking and vaping should be illegal. Number 8, all plastic should be banned. Number 9, cats are better than dogs. And the final debate topic to win is aliens are real. Here are my top 5 ESL reported speech games and activities. So what is reported speech? It's when you tell someone what another person said. So for example, maybe I would tell my sister, oh, mom said that you should do the dishes, something like that. So my mom didn't directly tell my sister, she told me to tell my sister. Or maybe if you're like overhearing some gossip or something and then you talk about it to another friend, oh, guess what? I heard Jen say that Bob and Carrie are getting divorced, something like that. So that's another example of reported speech. So here are some games and activities that you can use with your students. So the first one is ball toss. So write a bunch of questions on the ball. So for example, what's your favorite food? How many brothers and sisters do you have, etc. And then you can toss the ball to the first student. And then whatever I usually use the left thumb, lands on, that's the question. So they could ask a question to another student. So they could say, what's your favorite food? And then that other student says, my favorite food is pizza. and then they could toss the ball to another student, and that person has to use reported speech. Bob said that his favorite food is pizza, something like that. All right, the next one is that sentence correct? So the grammar of reported speech can be a little bit tricky because you have to change sometimes the pronouns, you have to change kind of the verb tenses and that kind of thing. So it can be a little bit confusing. So I would write down some sentences using reported speech. Some of them are correct, some of them are incorrect. I put students into pairs and they have to decide if the sentence is correct, they just leave it. If it's incorrect, they have to make the required changes in order to make it correct. The third one is a simple kind of interview introduction activity. So I put students into pairs and then I give them about 2 minutes and then 2 minutes to interview their partner to some basic questions like where did you grow up, what's your favorite food, what are your hobbies, etc. And then if you have a very small class, that person can introduce their partner using reported speech to the class. Or if you have a big class, I put students maybe into groups of 4 or 6 and they can do the same thing. So I'd interview my partner, say Bob over here, and Bob told me he likes pizza and his hobby is playing sports. So I'd introduce him to the class. This is Bob. He told me that he likes pizza and he said that he loves playing soccer, something like that. The fourth activity is to play a little bingo game, Find Someone Who. So you can either make up a bingo grid with just things like find someone who has a sister, has a brother, likes pizza, loves sports, loves watching hockey on TV, something like that. Students have to, or else students can fill in the squares with things that they are interested in, what they think other people in the class might answer yes to. And then they can circulate around the class talking to other people. And once they find someone that fits that criteria, so like loves pizza, they can write the name in the square and then it's done. And then when the class is, or when that activity is over, I elicit some answers from the students. So I say, tell me one thing that you learned. And then someone could use reported speech to say something. For example, Cindy told me that she has one sister, something like that. All right, the final activity for reported speech is Dictogloss. So this is a listening activity for higher level students. So you can write up a little dialogue or a paragraph, something like that, and then put students into pairs. And of course, the dialogue or the paragraph should have examples of reported speech. Put students into pairs and they can have a pen and paper. Then read it out at a faster than normal pace for that level of students. Students will take notes, whatever they can catch from it, and then they can compare with their partner and they try to recreate what they heard. And then you can read it out one more time, again, quite quickly, and they can compare with their partner again. And hopefully at this point, they'll kind of be able to recreate almost the gist of what you said. And then finally, they can compare their version with the original version. And then I will often use this as kind of a nice lead-in into the rest of my lesson on reported speech. One of the most important but overlooked skills is proofreading and editing. To be honest, if you are a business person or you're a teacher, you have any kind of job, you probably have to write things. And if you can't proofread and edit your own work, nobody will really take you seriously. If you write a business email that's full of mistakes, who's going to take you seriously? Or if you're a teacher and you're writing a bunch of report cards and there's a bunch of mistakes in them, the parents are going to wonder who is actually teaching my kids. That's why I love to teach my ESL or EFL students how to proofread and edit. So I know it's a little bit old school, it's a little bit boring, however, it is a very important skill. So the best way to do it is to have a little checklist. And this will of course depend on the level of the students, but some very basic things to add on there are punctuation, including like periods, commas, question marks, capital letters, subject-verb agreement, like they are, he is, things like that. Of course, spelling, overused words like great, awesome, good. There's so many better adjectives and descriptive words that you can use to replace that. So those are the most basic ones, and then it can get into way more complicated things as well, depending on the level. Okay, so that's it. Don't overlook proofreading and editing with your students, even if it's a little bit boring. Push through and do it with them because it actually is a very important skill. Round Robin Story is a very simple ESL writing activity. It's fun because it involves groups. So generally, writing is kind of a solo activity. That's why I like to try to make some kind of group or team writing activities just to kind of spice things up a little bit in my English classes. So Round Robin Story, each student has a piece of paper and a pen, and they start the story off with something. So it could be like a theme or it could just be general, like leave it open, and they write one sentence. So there was a guy named Bob. And then everyone passes their paper one to the left or to the right or in the circle or just however your classroom is set up. And then the next student adds a sentence. There was a guy named Bob. Bob went to the store yesterday. And then the students pass the paper along. And when this time is almost up, it depends how many sentences you want to add, depends on the level of the students and how much time you have for this activity. I'll generally say, okay, there's 2 more sentences left. Wrap up the story. So then they have to kind of like read the story and a little bit figure out how to end it. When all the stories are done and the time is up, I'll collect the stories and then I'll quickly read them out. Or you could have students just read the stories themselves. You could put them on the wall, something like that. Okay, so that is a very simple group writing activity you can try out in your ESL or EFL classes. Here are my top 5 ESL passive voice games and activities. First of all, what is the passive voice? You use the passive voice when the subject is the recipient of the action. What does that mean? Here are a few examples. The first example is when the agent of the action is not clear. My dog was let out. It's not clear who let the dog out of my yard. The second example is when the agent is not important. So if someone says, do you need a ride? You could say, I'm being picked up. It doesn't matter if it was my mom or my dad or my friend, whoever was picking me up. It doesn't matter. So I can use the passive voice. The third example is when the agent is obvious. So for example, I've been instructed to organize the Christmas party. If I'm at work, it was my boss that told me to organize the Christmas party. It's just so obvious that you don't even need to mention it. So here are my top 5 games and activities for teaching the passive voice. The first one is to use concentration. So make up a bunch of nouns and then a bunch of verbs that would kind of fit together in a passive voice sentence, and then students put students into groups of say 4 people, and they can place all these cards face down on their desk. So I'd maybe do 16, so 8 sets of 2, so 8 verbs, 8 nouns. The first student would take a card, one card and another card. If they kind of match and they can make a sentence, they can make a sentence using the passive voice. If correct, they could keep those 2 cards and they get 1 point. If it's incorrect, they place it face down in the same spot because it's a memory game, and the next student gets a chance to go. Continue on until all the cards are gone. The second activity is fill in the blank. So this is a very simple thing to do. Just kind of make a worksheet, or you can find them online. You're probably in the textbook that you're maybe using, and students can fill in the blanks with the correct nouns or the correct verbs. And then I get students to compare with a partner, and then we compare answers together with the class. So this is a very controlled exercise activity, kind of for right after you teach the initial concept of what the passive voice is. The third idea is kind of a freer practice exercise. It's famous inventions. So talking about inventions really leads to using the passive voice because the focus is on the invention, not necessarily on the person who made it. So put students into small groups, say 2 or 3 people, and they can use their phones. They can research a famous invention and then come up with a little presentation to give to the class using the passive voice for most of their sentences. So the length of time you use on this activity really varies. It can be 15 minutes, it can be 2 hours, whatever it is, and how much detail you expect out of your students and what kind of level they are as well. The fourth activity is error correction. So I would write up a bunch of sentences. Some of them are correct and some of them are incorrect in using the passive voice. And the ones that are correct, students just leave them. The ones that are incorrect, they have to make the required changes. The final passive voice activity is remember this. So I'd have a PowerPoint, or I'd even just have a simple tray if I have a small class, and I'd have different objects. I'd have like a pencil, an eraser, a pen, maybe my cell phone, whatever. And then I give students a minute or 2 to kind of study the tray. After that time, I tell students to close their eyes, or I turn my back if I have a tray, or if I have a PowerPoint, I can just have a second PowerPoint with the changes. Then maybe my pencil is missing, so I've taken away the pencil from that original thing. And students have to use the passive voice and tell me what was changed. So they could say the pencil was removed. So the focus is on the pencil, it's not on me, the person who removed it. And so then just continue on, you can have another slide or you can make another change, and then they could say, oh, an eraser was added, something like that. Here are my top 5 ESL small talk activities. Number 1 is 3 in a row. So I would put students into pairs, and then each pair matches up with another pair. So each group would have 4 students, 2 teams of 2. And then I would have a grid, a 5x5 grid, and I would write a bunch of topics on the board that people would kind of do for small talk. So like maybe getting to work, hobbies, weather, sports, weekend plans, all those things, kind of the latest TV shows, whatever. And then students would do paper, rock, scissors, and the winning team, they get to choose the first square. So maybe they would choose like hobbies. The other team would have their cell phone and they would do a timer for 1 minute. And the team that chose that hobbies square, their challenge is to talk about hobbies for 1 minute without stopping. If they're successful, they get to put an X on that square or an O, whatever that is. One team would be X, one team would be O. And the goal is to get 3 in a row. So after they're done, they put their X on there, and then the other team would choose a square, and they have to talk for 1 minute. All right, the second small talk activity is a cocktail party. So I try to replicate real life as much as possible in my classroom. So to kind of warm this activity up, I would get students to shout out some topics that people might talk about at a party. So maybe they would talk about their kids, they would talk about their weekends, maybe their upcoming holidays. Maybe they complain about the weather, they talk about the sports team, and then I would also get students to shout out some things that you shouldn't talk about. So for example, asking someone how old they are, talking about politics, religion, kind of like controversial like things like maybe like abortion, I don't know, whatever. You just want to avoid those controversial topics. So that's fresh in students' minds. And then I get students to kind of give me some examples of ways they would start a conversation. So they would shout out some examples, like for example, maybe do you have any weekend plans, or do you have any holidays coming up, whatever. So that's also fresh in students' mind. And then I say, okay, we're going to practice. So all the students will stand up, and then they can just mingle around the classroom, having little small talk conversations with everybody. And so I would also tell students that the goal is not to be stuck talking to someone for the entire 10 minutes or 15 minutes, however long we do this activity, but the goal is to mingle and kind of talk to everybody. So I'd also talk about ways to politely end a conversation. So I would say I encourage students to maybe talk to someone for maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then move on and talk to someone else. So if I notice students are just stuck talking to the same person, I would just kind of tap them on their shoulder and I'd say, okay, go talk to someone else now, and kind of just give them a gentle reminder about that. All right, the third activity is the expert. So everyone likes talking about things that they know a lot about. So I get students on a piece of paper to write down 3 things that they are very knowledgeable in. So maybe it's like cooking Korean food, playing softball, and pro tennis, something like that, watching pro tennis. And then I get them to choose maybe the 1 or 2 topics that they think other people might be most interested in. After that, I put students into pairs, and they would have their little paper with the 2 maybe topics that they think other people are most interested in circled. And then I get those 2 students to have a conversation for 4 or 5 minutes about the topics on their piece of paper. Once they're done that, I get them to switch, and then they can talk to someone else. So this is a very nice introductory activity. The fourth small talk activity is telling a story. So people at parties or at work, whatever, love to tell stories. And it's a kind of a nice way to get to know someone and to share your personality. So I have a little story prompt. So for example, maybe your most embarrassing moment, or a funny story from when you were in middle school or high school, something from when you were growing up, maybe your favorite holiday, whatever that is. And then I give students a little bit of time to prepare their story. So I don't want them to write sentence by sentence, but they can write a few little notes about the points that they're going to cover. Then I put students into groups of 4, and they would tell their story to the group. And so the first person is telling their story, the other 3 people are listening, and then at the end, those other 3 people have to ask a follow-up question, and then of course the person has to answer. Then the second person tells their story, and then so on it goes. And the 5th small talk activity is to give students some conversation starters. So if you tell students, okay, do small talk with your partner for 5 minutes, I mean, you're probably going to have a lot of silence in your class because there just isn't really enough information or structure to that class. Instead, I like to give students some conversation starters. I encourage like kind of free-flowing conversation, follow-up questions, but then they also have those conversation starters if they get stuck. So I would have, for example, like upcoming holiday plans, or what did you do last weekend? What's your plan for tonight? What do you think about the weather? Do you follow the Edmonton Oilers or whoever your local sports team is? And that kind of thing. So that is it for my small talk activities for your ESL classroom. If you like these ideas, please be sure to check out my book, 101 ESL Activities. I'll put the link up there, and please hit like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.